Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the virtual breakfast sessions. I'm Larry Sashin, and today we have a great guest on our show, Alex Bassett Strange. But before we talk to Alex, let's thank the guy who's paying our bills, Ed Flanagan and the ERA Company. Listen, ERA Group is there to help you get exactly what you pay for. If you think that you are not getting exactly what you pay for and you're buying $100,000 or more of that one item, call Era Group, Ed Flanagan, and their people will sift through your invoices, look through your contracts to make sure you're getting exactly what you pay for. And if you're not, they'll help you renegotiate your contract or get you a new source. So, Era Group, Ed Flanagan, and back to the show. Alex, why don't you tell everyone who you are?
Well, thank you, Larry. My name is Alex Bassett Strange. I'm with Bassett's Ice Cream Company. We are America's oldest ice cream brand, having been around since 1861. This company was founded by my great grandfather. We're a privately held family business, and we're based in Philadelphia. We have our ice cream shop in Philadelphia's wonderful Reading Terminal Market, and we have a growing wholesale business.
Okay. You know, looking through your history, I never thought I'd read idea, recipe, and mule in the same paragraph. Uh,
Yeah,
can you enlighten us with that?
sure. Sure. Well, I should say that it is the legend that my great grandfather would churn ice cream on his farm in Salem, New Jersey, using a mule churn. So there was a large tank, I suppose you could say, filled with milk, cream, and sugar, and some flavoring ingredients. And then outside of that, ice and salt. And he would have a mule that would walk the churn around and churn large batches of ice cream that he would then cart into Philadelphia and sell on Market Street. Um, you know, he had a few locations. One location he had, um, early on, 1885. It's across the street from where the Liberty Bell is now. Um, and right now that's Independence Visitor Center. But he had a business where he sold cheese and ice cream and butter and things like that. And he had that for a good number of years, until the Reading Terminal Market opened up in 1893, where he moved over there.
So obviously, you're not doing that anymore. So tell us a little bit how Bassett became a backyard venture, started as
Hmm.
a backyard venture, and now is an internationally distributed product.
Well, it's been very slow growth. It's taken us 164 years to get to where we are today. Um, for the first four generations, we were operating out of, like single location. We had a few wholesale accounts. I look back, sometimes I'll look through our archives and see, you know, um, back in the 1930s and 40s, selling to places like the Bluebell Inn, here in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Um, but it was always, really all about the ice cream shop. And it went from that mule churn to, like I mentioned, he opened that location on Fifth and Market in Philadelphia. He started making some ice cream there, um, and eventually the Reading Terminal Market opened 1893. He moved into the Reading Terminal Market, closed the Fifth and Market location shortly thereafter, was making ice cream at the Reading Terminal Market. And my grandmother, the fourth generation in our family, saw a real opportunity, to offer our ice cream to more people. Yeah, she wanted to expand our wholesale business. And my great grandfather was a little skeptical of the idea. He said, Ann, it takes a lot of money to run a wholesale business. At that point, it was already a fourth generation family business. And, I guess I'll tell you I've got many pieces of wisdom and advice from the older generation. I, as the sixth generation, when I showed an interest in this business and I got serious about it, my grandmother told me at that point it was a 150-year-old business. And she said, Alex, it's a 150-year-old business. You need to take risks to grow, but, don't let it end with you. You've got to pass it to the next generation. I'm sure that was something that my great grandfather was thinking about when he was cautioning my grandmother about the wholesale business. But my grandmother, was certain. She had a vision for it and grew our wholesale business. Did really well with pints. Was selling pints all over. And my uncle came into the business. He used to be he was an accountant for Price Waterhouse at the time. And my grandmother had grown the business through three master distributors. And unfortunately, two of those master distributors went out of business at the same time with a large receivable. And the company found itself in a pretty dire situation. We had a lot.
What year was that?
So my uncle came
Bucks.
into the business. Yeah, 1983 was when he
Mm-hmm.
came into the business. And the bank had come to my grandmother. We had a line of working capital loan, and it was secured by our receivables. When those receivables had to be written off as bad debt, we no longer had the collateral for the loan, and it
Yeah.
looked pretty dire for our company. And so my uncle, who has this financial background, was in this budding accounting career, was called in by my grandmother, and he wanted to be in private industry, but wasn't so sure that he wanted to join the family ice cream business. But as I understand, my grandmother and great grandfather took him out to dinner, and as he says, a full court press. And he joined the business, was able to restructure our loan, was able to work out a deal where we could continue to distribute to the sub distributors, and clawed our way out of that dire financial situation. And in doing so, really fell in love with
Oh, I think he's frozen.
Yep.
creating some ice cream in. So everybody loves the ice cream, but he really fell in love with the business.
What's his name? Is he still alive?
Yeah, Michael Strange, still alive, still involved. He's our CEO. I am the
Okay.
president of
Yeah.
Bassett's. And, I talk with him just about every single day. We talk about some of the challenges that we're working through, and he gives great advice. And he's involved in the strategic level. He likes to say 30,000 feet. He says, if it's not a 30,000 foot problem, Alex, I want you to handle it, which is great for me. So that's kind of how we got to where we are. The international side of it is interesting. That was something that my uncle started back in 2008. He attended a business development and networking event at St. Joe's University here in the Philadelphia area. And and he met a food broker who said that he's representing somebody looking to buy American desserts and sell them in China. And you know, my uncle ended up putting together a box of samples and sent that to China. And the way he says it, you know, he wasn't expecting anything from it. You know, you send a box of samples and, you know, maybe something happens, maybe it doesn't, probably not. Well, sure enough, um, you know, a few things happened, and then we ended up with a purchase order for ice cream, and we needed to figure out what to do with that. So we reached out to the World Trade Center, Greater Philadelphia, the Small Business Administration, and Food Export Northeast, and these entities helped us figure out how do we send ice cream to China, how do we do it safely, how do we
Right.
structure these transactions, and you know, ultimately with the goal of growing, but growing safely. You know, we can't. You know, these are when you send ice cream internationally, generally it's on a shipping container. It's a 40-foot container. You can fit 18 pallets on one of those, and you know, that ends up being a lot of ice cream. Um, you know, over 6,000 gallons of ice cream can go on one of those containers. So, um, you know, you have to protect yourself against potential non-payment. You know, what
Mhm.
happens if the ice cream melts on the way? You know, all these things you have to really kind of protect yourself against. And we were guided by the World Trade Center of Greater Philadelphia, and
So has it been a good positive revenue growth
it,
area of
it's
growth?
it's been great. You know, I'll
Yeah.
tell you, it's not without its challenges. Um, you know, the we're exporting right now to China and Taiwan. And the tastes in China and Taiwan are a little different than here in the United States. But I'll tell you that every flavor that we make, we sell at our store in the Reading Terminal Market. All of the product that we export, um, you know, I guess that it tells you it's made in the United States. All of the Bassett's ice cream that you'd find anywhere in the world, made in the United States. Um, and what what the Southeast Asian consumer likes is fruit and nut flavors. So you know, I have an interesting anecdote. I was at a trade show in Southeast Asia, and we had a freezer with 12 flavors in it. And in the United States, when you have 12 flavors, flavors like cookies and cream and salted caramel pretzel, you would expect those to go first. But our moose, excuse me, our macadamia nut, which I think is a very subtle flavor. Candidly, it's not my favorite.
Yeah.
You know, my favorites are peanut butter swirl, but it's a, you know, it's a high quality nut. It's a very subtle, not so sweet flavor, and that was the first one to go in our case. It's pretty amazing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
So,
one of the
So
so
things
how do
I'm
you fill orders on something like
yeah.
that? It's not like you call the distributor and and they bring a truck over. How do they plan when you say one went first and you've got everything else? So how do you restock the shelves? What are the
it's
logistics that are involved?
well, thankfully we had a wholesale business that had matured to the point where we keep a stock of you know, quite a few tubs of Bassett's ice cream. Um, we have delivery routes in Philadelphia where we serve dozens of independent ice cream parlors, restaurants, country clubs. So we had a stock of ice cream, but this is a significant, you know, quantity. So planning is very important. You know, what we do is we ask our partners internationally for projections. You know, what are they expecting to buy and when? And we look at what they've bought in the past to try to help us understand, you know, it's been so much time since the last order. I think they're going to buy another one, and these are the flavors that are popular. So
Mhm.
I, you know, I work with our scheduler to you know, make sure that we have product, you know, for those international shipments. Um, And so that's kind of how we stay stocked up. But it's not easy. And I'll tell you that, just this year, I mean, it's it's a it's been a little bit of a bumpy road internationally. We had been exporting quite a bit over the winter, um, which was wonderful. Our partner in China picked up a chain of cinemas, wonderful chain of cinemas. I was just over there last month, meeting with them, and they serve our ice cream in their concession area. So the volume had increased quite a bit, and um, in March the tariffs hit, and all of a sudden those orders came to a halt. But we had production scheduled, we had ingredients coming in, we had people scheduled to make the ice cream, and so the pipeline was full. We ended up um, you know booking some extra storage and storing that product. Thankfully, those tariffs went back down and we were able to resume shipping. But not before we had laid out a plan to use up our inventory with no ingredients coming in or production scheduled for a period of time. And it just so happens that the tariffs were dropped as soon as we put that plan into place. So it was a little bit touch and go for a bit. But thankfully we were able to make it happen. I mean, that's just kind of what you do.
So as you look at this business, it strikes me there's three buckets. There's the
Yeah.
retail operation. Is there
Yes,
the single? Is there one store at Reading Terminal Market? Is that the
that's
only
right. The only company owned store. That's right.
only retail? Okay. And then
Yep.
secondly, there's a domestic distribution business
Yep.
in the greater Philadelphia area. Is there also distribution nationally?
Yeah.
In
I would love to get to a national distribution level, but
Yeah.
but right now we work with independent independent distributors in some of the major metropolitan areas on the East Coast. We have distribution in New York, in DC, in Miami. We also have some distribution in Atlanta, and we started working more with Cisco to serve food service accounts in some different markets,
Got
which
it.
has been great.
That was my question. So you're no longer dependent on that small um, ice cream only distributor. You've gone to that. You're at the sort of at the next level in terms of being able to build out distribution.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What about the role of ice cream on food service menus? Um, how
Hmm.
do you know? It seems to me we went through this. It actually goes back to Seinfeld, where we thought that we were going to be able to eat some kind of frozen yogurt and it was going to have less calories and it was going to be healthier, et cetera. Why don't you talk a little bit about how how the mindset of the product has changed?
Yeah. Well, that you know what that brings up a great point. We talk about this often. In fact, we're seeing a trend right now. But I'll back it up a little bit to frozen yogurt was a big trend, and frozen yogurt believed that it was going to disrupt the ice cream industry, and to some degree it did for a period of time. Um, but you know, preferences went back to a full fat ice cream. And then, shortly after that, it was you remember the low calorie craze for ice cream. Halo Top is a brand that comes to mind for this, is another disruptor. People eat that for a while um, and then, you know, come back to a full fat product. And right now we're seeing protein ice cream is a really big trend. But the guiding thing for me, and I've seen this happen, is that we as a brand, we've made a decision to stick with my great grandfather's 16.5% milk fat super premium recipe and not change it, not chase the trends. Sure, I did a tart frozen yogurt. We did it in the Bassett's way. We put as much fat as possible into that frozen yogurt while everybody was going with the low fat. And it ate. It was a really awesome product. It was tart, probiotic,
Yep.
but it also ate like an ice cream. But it really didn't move the needle too much for us. So we stick with our recipe, and we find that the industry, has these ups and downs as these trends come and go.
Frankly, I think it's a lot like mocktails. I mean, you either have a
Yeah,
cocktail or you don't, and I think
right.
it's the same thing with ice cream. It's a
Yeah,
very hard product to gerrymander, if you will.
Yes.
it's an indulgence.
Right.
And I think that if there's a brand out there that I admire their slogan. They say, if you want nutrition, eat a carrot.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I think that, ice cream is something that, if you're going to have it, if you're going to indulge in it, it better be good. Those calories better be worth it. And that's kind of my thinking when it comes to, our recipe.
Yeah. So what
This,
you're talking about is
yeah.
if they're going to be idle calories, you might as well make them good idle
That's
calories.
right. Yeah.
So what I have a question for, and it comes into our shows very often. Fred and I are boomers. We have similar flavor palettes.
Hmm.
Gen Z is a completely different being. Their flavor
Yeah.
palettes are sometimes appalling to us. Sometimes they're good. How are you modifying your product to meet Gen Z?
Well, what we do, as I mentioned, all of the flavors that we make, we sell at our store in the Reading Terminal Market. And right now, we're right around 40 different flavors. So, in our case, literally right next to the rum raisin, I have birthday cake. Or, we will try and come out with one new full scale flavor that we offer, through our wider distribution each year. And we'll try to do around 6 or 7 um, smaller batch flavors. Ones like right now, what I'm getting ready to release is a mint chocolate chip with ice cream sandwiches in it. And I think that's fun. It's a, a green mint a green mint flavor background with chocolate chips and whole ice cream sandwiches. So as you're scooping through it, you get the ice cream sandwich wafer, vanilla, and that green mint chocolate chips. Visually appealing, and it's also really tasty. So yeah, we try to do 6 or 7, small batch, more experimental flavors for us. Um,
They go from
and
small batch to the successful ones become part of your menu. That's your testing
exactly,
ground.
it's kind of
What
like
about
our incubator.
so as you look at an item like that, is that an item that you will then bring to caterers to utilize as a holiday? Is that a holiday dessert? Like how do you position from a food service standpoint? How do you
Hmm.
position these different special batches that you create or help the chef accomplish that?
Well, it really depends on the flavor. So,
Yeah.
I see a flavor like that as more of an ice cream parlor flavor.
Okay.
Um, you know, but we will do small batches of other flavors that might be a little bit more food service centric. We did a coffee cookies and cream, which I think some of our local restaurants liked. Um, but it kind of depends, on the flavor. I would say that a flavor like chocolate fudge brownie for us, more of an ice cream parlor flavor, while um, a flavor like our lemon sorbet, I think is an excellent, restaurant flavor.
So it's interesting. As we talk to you, you have a certain bias and love, I can tell, for ice cream parlors.
Yeah.
Um, what's the state of that business? Um, why aren't you in your own retail businesses versus serving other people, et cetera? How did you come to that decision that you
Yeah.
wanted to be a purveyor to others rather than doing your own thing?
Well, so we run our store in Reading Terminal Market, and that's first it's a wonderful location. Um, but I would say that what I find the really rewarding for me is that when we partner with an independent parlor like Bread and Beck's in Chestnut Hill, Bread and Beck's knows Chestnut Hill. They're part of the community in Chestnut Hill, and they're able to offer our ice cream in such a way that really speaks to the community. And we like partnering with independent parlors that can, you know, offer Bassett's ice cream, but put their own spin on it.
So it's
And so that
basically a home-based product as opposed to a large company opening a store in your area.
exactly,
I got it.
exactly.
Good concept. Good concept.
Yeah, we like that, and also, I mean, it's not easy running a retail
Different
operation.
business.
It's a
Yeah.
totally different business. Would I like to get into potentially a second location? Um, yeah, we've been thinking about it. Um,
I mean, it seems to
but
me that it would be a perfect venue, perfect addition to the new arena or new stadium going in Philly when that happens.
that would be pretty neat.
Yeah.
Um, what we want to do is make sure that, I don't lose focus on
Yeah.
growing our wholesale business and keeping right now it's 133 or 132-year-old coming on 133-year-old ice cream parlor. And, we've got to maintain the experience and the quality there. And I think the best way to do that is to, expand through our wholesale distribution to allow independent parlors operators to, um, handle the customer service experience for, their areas.
Because the truth is,
On
if you look at the history of Howard Johnson's, Friendly's, Brigham's, these were all large regional chains that are no longer with us. And in each case, it came from an expansion of Beyond Ice Cream into a full restaurant, full menu, and the brand, the ice cream and the brand all got lost along the way.
Yeah.
So clearly you've taken the right track.
Yeah.
Well,
Whatever
one
you do,
thing,
Lewis Dubois
Yeah.
is there with you, and you're
he
carrying that on your shoulders.
Well,
he is, I hear my grandmother telling me, don't mess it up. But I'll say that, you know, food service, ice cream parlors, that's one thing, we are looking to and actively growing in our pint category. We want to have that take home Bassett's experience, more widely available too. Right now, in the Philadelphia area, available through giant supermarkets, Whole Foods, and some independents like McCaffrey's and Wegmans, Weaver's Way, some of these other grocery chains, and that I think is another area that we can grow in.
the other thing we
But
saw for a while, we saw a plant-based trend in ice cream. There's companies like Van Leeuwen that retail with plant. Have you looked at that? Any thoughts on that? Is it a fad? What do you see?
It's really interesting you bring that up. I am interested in a plant-based product. And I think that there is a plant-based product in the future for Bassett's. Um, you know, in the early goings when your options were soy based or oat based or coconut based, I never really fell in love with one of those products. And I think I'm on to something. So stay tuned. But what's really interesting is that my wife um, can't have dairy. And so, it's one of those things where, she's asking me for a non-dairy option. And of course, I bring the sorbets home and yeah, she'll eat some ice cream and suffer the consequences. Unfortunately, and I think that's a reality for more people today than it has been before. So it's important for us to, but at the same time, like I said before, we wouldn't be changing our underlying recipe.
Mhm.
This would really be an additional line of products that we're looking at.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah. So listen, it's time is our enemy, and comes to that part of the show where we have to start thinking about wrapping up.
Okay.
I look at your company as one foot in Norman Rockwell and the other foot in Banksy. So it's you're so far you're doing a great balancing act. But before we go around the room and say our goodbyes, let's thank the guy who's paying the bills, Ed Flanagan in the Era Group. Listen, I've been talking about this for years. If you're spending $100,000 or more in any vertical, call Ed Flanagan and the Era Group. They will go through your contracts, make sure you've been delivered exactly what you paid for at the right price. And on top of that, if they see room in your contracts that they think they can renegotiate or get you a better contract someplace else, they'll do that for you. So Era Group and Ed Flanagan, back to the show. Alex, this has been a great trip, and we didn't even have to leave our living room. So it's wonderful. I loved your ice cream when I lived in Hamilton for 2 years. And when I saw you in the specialty food show, I recognized the name immediately. And I'm glad I opened my mouth and said hello. I look forward to searching out your products in my neighborhood. Listen, give us that last little tidbit of information that people need to know about Bassett's ice cream.
Yeah. Well, I would say that, Bassett's Ice Cream is the oldest ice cream company in the United States. And with that, we've got a legacy recipe. It's made it's a Philadelphia style ice cream. Later that became known as American style ice cream. But what that means is that there's no egg yolk in there. And so it's a very dairy forward flavor. That high butter fat lets that linger on your tongue. The specific balance of milk and cream and sugar and solids make for a silky smooth mouthfeel. So I encourage anybody who's listening just to give us a try and see what you think. See what's kept us in business for the 164 years.
Okay, Fred.
Great story, Alex. Thanks for sharing.
Thank
All
you,
right.
guys.
All right. So listen, we've just spoke to Alex Strange about Bassett ice cream. The last description of his ice cream was basically similar to somebody describing a fine wine. So if you want to have the fine wine of ice cream, check out, see if Bassett's is in your area. Thanks again, Alex, for coming. We're going to be here again next week. So listen, everybody, until then, stay positive, test negative, and we'll see you next week. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank
Bye
you,
now.
fellas. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred and Larry.
Thanks, guys.